morning. You're listening to What's at Stake on WPFW 89.3 FM, and I am Reverend Graylin Scott Hagley, your host, every second Wednesday of the month. Our executive producer is Verna Avery Brown, and our engineer this morning is Michael Nasella. And we are a listener-supported program, and your contributions keep us on the air, bringing to you jazz and justice. We're bringing to you this morning the justice mandate in our mission. And of course, we definitely need your contributions, and we will be seeking those out today, right now, and throughout the rest of the show this morning. So please be generous. Now, many people across the country have been organizing and mobilizing to come to Washington, D.C. in an expression of righteous indignation over the treatment of the poor, over low-wage workers, the treatment of the environment, and the fact that trillions can be easily spent on wars, but every dime is hard fought to fund programs for children, for families, to lift the poor out of poverty, or to provide a pathway where there is hope and not despair. The Poor People's Campaign is coming to Washington, D.C. They've been here, but they're coming here in a massive march and assembly on June 18th. On June 18th, there will be a poor people's and low-wage assembly and moral march to the polls. The Poor People's Campaign have been building this for some time. And today to talk about the issues and the plan is Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, who should be joining us shortly. She is co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Along with the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis is our DC organizer for the Poor People's Campaign and a dear, dear friend of mine, Zillah Wesley II. Zillah has been engaged in matters to make certain that the national agenda of the Poor People's Campaign has legs and connection here on the ground in Washington, D.C. and in the DMV. She has been doing that with great care and insight, great energy. Our next guest will be Vikram Chiruvolu, who is the co-facilitator of a group called Adams Morgan for Reasonable Development. And Zillah, you have been connected to Vikram and his efforts to defend the Adams Morgan neighborhood from development that victimizes the poor and displaces the homeless. Truist Bank has been trying to develop the plaza for condos in Adams Morgan, and in clearing the plaza for development, it resulted in the death of a homeless man. We will talk about all of this and make connections with one another on what's at stake. And Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, it's good to have you here with us. And I'm going to invite you to kick us off in terms of making some of these connections.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Hagler. It's always powerful to be with you. And we are getting ready for a mass poor people and low-wage workers assembly, a moral march on Washington and to the polls there in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue on June 18th, Saturday, June 18th, gathering at 9:30, program starting around 10, hearing from the voices, seeing the faces of people from all across the country, but including shining a light on the poverty, on the racism, on the homelessness, on the low wages, on the low wealth of those in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital that still does not have, still has representation, taxation without representation, still has, hunger and homelessness just a block from the Capitol, just a block from the White House. And so we are saying to the city and to the nation, somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. And that's what June 18th is about, is saying we aren't going to be unseen. We're not going to be silent. We're going to make sure that the city, that the administration, that the nation comes to terms, mourns, and repents about the fact that we have levels of injustice that are at such high rates when they just do not have to be. And so, it's been amazing to have so many folks from across the city, in Washington, D.C., longtime residents and activists who have said, we need to make our voices heard and make our faces and bodies seen, because we can't just go along with how things are going right now.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend. Zillah, I want to ask you, because you've been here just working day in and day out on the ground, connecting with groups and organizations. How do you feel things are going in terms of coming together, in terms of mobilizing people?
I'm surprised it's going really well, because people are seeing that this is a time in this country and in the city of moral uprising, as in the sense of we need to come together, because a lot of these buildings are sitting empty, that they displace people for. Vikram was telling me about what was happening in Adams Morgan. And like my grandparents live like right down the street. So it's one of those things, but it's like you can't even, it's so much going on and so much confusion, but people feel it, right? People feel the angst. It's a lot of anger in this city. Even how, so people have been really vibing with us and just really are coming out to really stand up for the moral compass of this country, the moral compass of the city. Because even as you ride around, you see more and more parks fenced off because of the mayor and the city council just saying, we can't have unhoused people here to like destroy the look of the city. But the reality is these are also residents who work here, go to school here, who are a part of this everyday fabric that keeps this city running and this country running too. So yeah, that's why June 18th is super important, because we're here. People are really, and I've been surprised about the cross-pollination of different organizations, different organizers, even non-organizers, people of faith and non-faith coming together through the city who are like, I'm down to stand up for June 17th and 18th because something's got to give.
And Vikram, you have been working in Adams Morgan. Tell us what you've been doing in Adams Morgan, and also how does that tie into the agenda of the Poor People's Campaign?
We're really grateful to be here, Reverend Hagler, and to be with you, Zillah and Reverend Theoharis. So I've been working in Adams Morgan. I've been living here 15 years and working for the last 6 on a set of initiatives around what we call reasonable development, which is to create that when we do economic development in this city, that we're able to not leave behind anyone. And at the corner of 18th and Columbia, which is the heart of the Adams Morgan neighborhood, there's a site that I have personally sat at, dozens, maybe hundreds of times over the years that I've lived here. I'm a person of faith, and I attend a recovery group just a few doors down every Thursday night, and after that meeting would go to this central plaza at 1800 Columbia and spend time in fellowship and communion and connection, and had many life-altering conversations at that exact place. And in 2016, the bank that owns it, which at that time was SunTrust, which is now rebranded to Truist, SunTrust proposed to turn that into luxury condos. In other words, to pave over that space. And the whole time that I'd lived there was never a private property sign up on this plaza. There was never any indication that it was private. And it was always available for use. And I thought, that just doesn't seem right. You wouldn't put condos over DuPont Circle, right? Or any of our central public spaces. Why would you do it here? And that started me on a journey of learning a great deal about how these projects come to pass, how they get rationalized, how they get funded, how people get really harmed along the way. And the way that it ties in to what's happening on June 18th is that just in this past year, during the pandemic, an unhoused encampment came together on that plaza. and one of the people that lived in that unhoused encampment, named Miguel Gonzalez, was displaced. He had his tent and sleeping bags confiscated, and then in the bank's attempt to finally close off the plaza for development, despite still being in court, they went ahead and engaged in this, what I call, act of corporate violence, and essentially created that this man who had lived in the neighborhood for almost 50 years, and I'm really grateful to hear that your grandparents are nearby, Zillah, that he had lived there because he lived in the neighborhood, and he was a victim of corporate violence, with his mother having been subject to a predatory reverse mortgage after working all her life to finally own her own condo in Adams Morgan. When she passed, it essentially got foreclosed on, and he lost all of the possible intergenerational wealth that would have been there. And so Miguel was struggling, and this was the straw that, broke the proverbial camel's back. And the grace of it is he decided to stay in the neighborhood and to stay connected to his people rather than be gentrified out of the city.
What happened to him?
He died on March 29th in the cold snap. It was the last cold snap of the winter. That morning, he had his head up against the concrete barriers, the fence that had been erected by the bank, and he died on that plaza. By all accounts, he's just an absolutely sweetheart, wonderful man who was well known in the neighborhood, who cared for people, who people cared for him, and he lost his life. And so on June 17th, the day before the big big march down at the mall, we're calling on folks to gather at 3 o'clock at 1800 Columbia Northwest for a rally to tell and lift up Miguel's story and to help people understand the connections between what happens in each of our little pockets, each of our little neighborhoods, and what's going on this broader scale.
So Zillah will join in with that, right? We'll be there together.
Yes, and then we're gonna march down to Freedom Plaza with some people to join the communal dinner at 5 o'clock. And
as we continue to lift it up, these issues, I want to go back to Liz, Reverend Liz, because we know very often people talk about statistics and facts and figures and numbers, but Vikram really just sort of highlighted that it really results in people, individual lives, families that are hurt and lost. Liz, will you come back and say a few words about that?
Well, indeed. I mean, this is about people's lives and people's deaths, right? I mean, and that's what's on the line here, is that, it's a huge number. 140 million people are poor and low income. 250,000 die every year in this richest country in the world from poverty. That 250,000 people are people like who Vikram was just talking about, who dies in this spot. Not because it was, their time to come home. It's not that God was calling them, that there had been a good life that had been well lived. I mean, I'm sure that life is well lived, but it wasn't people's time. It's not 700 people a day who die from poverty, time to be called home. I mean, it's not when 1 million people have died from COVID and our nation has not paused for a day or a week to just cry and mourn. Those are lives. That's what we're talking about. Lives that do not have to be cut short. And lives of poor and low income people whose value is measured in death these days. That when we have the resources to do something and our society chooses not to, that results in death. That results in loss. And that's what June 18th is about. Not having a party on the street where there's another one going on. But this is not a party. This is a place for our nation to come to terms with that. It does not have to be this way. How is it possible we can have more 5 abandoned houses for every homeless person, every unhoused person across cities and towns across the country, and yet we can have tens of millions of people who don't have a place to call home? Like that has to change. And the people that are impacted when lives are cut short and made harder because of poverty in a place that it's just wrong and immoral and unneeded and unnecessary. We got to prick the conscience. We got to prick the conscience, and we got to build the power, as Dr. King said, the power to make those in power say yes, even if they have been desirous to say no, even if we've heard no to DC statehood, no to expanded housing, no to expanded healthcare. Well, we are going to change those no's into yeses, but it only happens when those who have lost people, when those whose lives have been made have been impoverished, come together. And as we say in the Poor People's Campaign, it's that fusion. It's when those that are most impacted come together and band together with people from all walks of life that we have the chance. We have the chance of actually turning this around.
And I just want to say this, Reverend Theoharis has been a preacher and a theologian that has been working on these issues a long time. And she is co-chair with the Reverend William Barber II, who was also the co-chair with her of the Poor People's Campaign. And we're just very, very thankful for their voices and their clarity, their theological depth that we need to bring to this historical moment. Now, I need to do a little housekeeping here, because if you're just tuning in, you're listening to What's at Stake. I am Reverend Graylin Scott Hagler, the host every second Wednesday of the month. You're listening to WPFW FM 89.3. We are talking with Reverend Liz Theoharis and Zillah Wesley II of the Poor People's Campaign, and Vikram Chiruvolu of the group Adams Morgan for Reasonable Development. Now, if you're just tuning in, you need to know that we need to raise some money in this hour. And to keep the programs on the air on WPFW. Now, WPFW has been, as far as we are concerned, the official voice of the Poor People's Campaign here in Washington, D.C., and we have endeavored to cover everything that the Poor People's Campaign has been doing in Washington, D.C., have been guided and lifted there and pushed there by Katia Stiff, who continues to be engaged in not only this issue, but many important issues. And so we need to raise some money today. We need to be able to keep our programs on the air. And I'm going to invite Katia to say a word or two about what we need to do and how we need to keep this on the air.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, it's been an early morning. Thank you, Reverend Hagler. How are you, first of all?
I'm good. You can say thank you.
No, and I can't say thank you. I have to be forward. I can't say thank you, Graylin, either. Thank you, Reverend Doctor. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Reverend Hagler. And welcome again, Reverend Theoharis, and to your other guests. It's really nice to be with you. And first of all, let me tell you that we got the word from the Poor People's Campaign that our technical infrastructure is there. So once again, WPFW will be producing the live broadcast from there for the Pacifica Network. We're really excited to be on the ground again with you all and bringing the voices of the people most affected by this really lack of compassion that we see throughout our society, but especially by those who are supposed to be taking care of us. We're understanding more and more that we take care of us. That's what's got to happen. But we have to hold those accountable who are supposed to be doing the work and getting paid to do the work, to do the work. And that is what the Poor People's Campaign does, and bringing together, what do you say, from the from the hood to the holla. Is that hollows? Is that it, Reverend Theoharis?
That's it.
Is it? Yeah, I love that. I love that. I just, that embodies everything that we need to be doing right there. So join us right now in this work. Reverend Hagler said it. We are about jazz and justice. And we say jazz, we mean jazz music, the foundation, but all musics that come from that. We have been celebrating Prince the last couple of days. And I can only imagine, if he were here, that he actually might be working with the Poor People's Campaign. He understood the scourge of poverty. He came out of that himself in Minneapolis. And, we saw how he came to Baltimore, did something in the wake of Freddie Gray's murder and did it immediately. I can only imagine, I'm sure he would be here with us, and I'm sure that he would look at this as something that America really should be ashamed of itself, to have folks who are working hard. No one is lazy, working hard, and yet can't have access to basic things like healthcare, quality healthcare, adequate housing, enough food. There is no reason why anyone should go to bed hungry here in America with all the resources, all the wealth. And so concentrating that wealth among just a few people and everyone else suffers does not work. And WPFW has been bringing this message to you all since 1977, but we've also been bringing folks like Reverend Theoharis, like our other guest today, like Reverend William Barber, like so many others who have come before to talk about how we build a better world. That is what WPFW does. That is what What's at Stake does with all of its wonderful hosts. Reverend Graylin Hagler, of course, executive producer of the collective, Verna Avery Brown, Fahima Sek, and Marsha Coleman Adebayo. So we ask you right now to go to the phone, and someone responded. We want to thank Anonymous out of DC for a generous pledge of support. Thank you so very much. And they say to you all, Reverend Hagler, thank you for all that you do. We have $260 to go, folks. Freedom really is not free. If we know nothing else, we know, and I'm sure Reverend Theoharis would endorse this, freedom is not free. And you need to support media outlets that support you, that support the people, that bring the real facts to you, like today, what you're hearing, what's happened should have never happened to that poor man. It's just, again, lack of compassion and greed that forces these things to happen. There is no reason that we should have unhoused neighbors unless folks want to be unhoused. But if someone wants a house, they should be able to have a house. They should be able to live with dignity. And WPFW is here to make sure the voices that are doing this good work, like Reverend Theoharis, like the other members of the Poor People's Campaign in DC, in Maryland, Virginia, across this country, their voices are amplified so that we can do something. This is activist radio. And one way you can become an activist immediately is by going to your phone. $260 is a very easy lift. It's $800 for some. And we know that there are some out there within the sound of our voices that can do it. So if you've done well and want to do good for yourself, for your community, for your world, pick up the phone, 202-588-9739, 800-222-9739, or WPFWFM.org. The Prince packages are still available only until tonight at midnight, and then they go away. You can get that 2 CD set we've been talking about with the Blu-ray DVD for a pledge of $250, or you can pick up the 3 LP vinyl set, which is near to my heart, for $325. And if you do either one of these things, we will be golden for this hour. So support the good work of Reverend Graylin Hagler. He is modest. He does good work here on our air, but he does so much more good work out there in the community and really around the world, from Palestine to DC to Ferguson, wherever it's happening. And he'll be with us, of course, on the 18th, wherever it's happening. Reverend Hagler, wherever there's injustice, Reverend Hagler is there fighting. And we cannot take for granted that he is willing to come here and volunteer and bring all of that work, all of that expertise to our airwaves. So right now, support him, support this good work, support this great station. $260 to go, 800-222-9739, or WPFWFM.org. Reverend Hagler?
Thank you, Katia. And you're not limited to raising that extra $260. You can go $360, $500, doesn't matter. We just need everything. And as I always say, in the community of folks who are faithful and justice minded, the beauty is that somebody can do more when somebody else only can do less. But the more helps to take care of the less, and it comes together to make it bountiful and make it plenty. So whether you think that you don't have enough to give, you can give a little something. Give a little something. If you have an abundance, you've been blessed, give a little more. But one thing is sure, is to keep this station on the air, because when you hear what goes on WPFW, it does not go on anyplace else. The types of issues that we discuss here are really not discussed anywhere else. And that's why it's so important, vitally important, to keep this on the air. And I want to just stop and go over to Brother Vikram again and sort of ask him, what do you see as the solution, the resolve in Adams Morgan around the issues of reasonable development?
So in Miguel's case, in particular, it's really instructive. He was the victim of economic violence with that predatory mortgage I mentioned. His family immigrated from the Dominican Republic. His mother struggled all her life. As far as we can discern, she was not documented, which meant that when she was 80 years old in 2009, she came to fully own a $300,000 condo in Adams Morgan through decades of activism that created that it transitioned from a slumlord to a low equity co-op, and then from a low equity co-op to a condo, and then that she could get full ownership of that condo. And she had that when she was 80 years old in 2009. And what happened next is, because she couldn't get Social Security being undocumented, we think is the likely reason she got lured into that predatory reverse mortgage, where they put a $625,000 lien on her $300,000 apartment with a 75-year term. It was preposterous that we allow loans like this to occur and target people who are vulnerable. Is just a reprehensible part of the whole framework of economic violence that we are seeing in our country. And so, in Adams Morgan, what I would have loved to see is, the opportunity for someone like her who is undocumented to have some other way of meeting her basic needs, whether it's amnesty for all undocumented to get Social Security or something like that. And then for Miguel to actually be able to stay in and age in place. He was almost 60 years old when he passed. Like, he had worked in the city all his life at different places, like the Watergate Hotel. He had graduated from Wilson High School. So this was a native son that did not get his basic due as a resident and a member of our community. And it was a direct result of economic violence, so that, when she passed, he got a bill for $425,000. And over the course of the next year and a half was essentially pushed out onto the street and told to just sort of go to the wind. And so, what we would love to see is that we start to focus our efforts on these very particular ways that real estate interests, economic interests assert themselves and take people's intergenerational wealth and ultimately take their lives.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And if you want to get in on our discussion today, and I invite you to get in on our discussion, you can call us at 202-588-0893, 202-588-0893. And also do not forget to give, to be generous today. You can get in the discussion at 202-588-0893. And I want to just comment and ask Zillah, what are some of the groups in and around the DMV that the Poor People's Campaign has connected with?
We have connected with One DC. We have connected with some of the sororities and fraternities, some churches, United Church of Christ, the Methodist, Episcopal Church. We have connected with a few synagogues all over the city. We've connected with Brooklyn Manors Tenants Association. That's one group who's with us. So it's like so many groups. Defend Democracy is a new group that joined. Some labor unions, some workers out of different hotels and all of that. One Fair Wage is with us. Like so many groups, and a lot of Harriet's Dream is another collective that's with us. And it's all like, it's so beautiful to see the fusion movement, because Like Reverend Theoharis said earlier, this is a fusion movement, and DC is really like the DC and even D&D collective has been very fusion, and very much like ready to wail together in this time of mourning, because we've been in functioning depression and functioning mourning as a community and as a world, and just really acting like everything's normal. And people are just tired of acting like this. And June 18th June 17th and 18th are really a declaration of a moment of time where we're going to wail. And then the next day, the work's going to begin too, because we really have to stand up for each other, everybody in, nobody out.
And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to What's at Stake on WPFW FM 89.3. I'm Reverend Graylin Scott Hagler, your host every second Wednesday of the month, and we're talking with the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and Zillah Wesley II of the Poor People's Campaign, and Vikram Chiruvolu of the group Adams Morgan for Reasonable Development. I want to go for a second again back to Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, and I want to ask you this question, Reverend. What do you feel that people are listening? Do you feel that people are hearing the call?
So I think we have been hearing from grassroots people all across the city, all across the country, that they're getting on those buses. Some of people are biking, people are doing caravans. There's even folks that are marching and walking. And this is really a diverse fusion of people. But so many poor, low-income folks, people that have had to bury kids because of the lack of Medicaid expansion in Alabama, folks who've had all of their possessions seized because their homeless encampment has been destroyed in Aberdeen, Washington. This is what we're hearing, story upon story. This past weekend, Reverend Dr. Barber and myself were in Newark, New Jersey, and then Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and women there walked up to us and said, we've been hearing and waiting for a campaign like this for just so many years. And one woman actually handed $10 to Dr. Barber and said, "This is all I have, but if this will help someone else to be able to get to DC and make our voices heard." And so I really feel like there is something happening across the country that people are seeing the connections between gun violence and war, the connections between attacks on abortion, and on trans youth. And I think people are making those connections and saying, if in the words of my co-chair, Dr. Barber, if those that we're up against, our adversaries, are mean enough, cynical enough to be together to hurt us, then are we going to be smart enough and hopeful enough to actually get together, those rejected millions, and be able to make a loud noise, and follow those steps of nonviolent direct action. What June 18th is about is making our demands known, and then pledging that as we keep on putting the pressure, as we turn people out for the midterms and beyond, that we will come back and engage, and continue to push, because that's what time it is.
I'm gonna push back in the Graylin Hagler way, just for a little bit. You got folks like Senator Manchin over in Virginia who don't hear a word, and you got right now, after mass shooting and children again being killed in a school, you would think that action around at least that would have taken place overnight, right? You would think, right? But the reality is the gun turned out to be more precious than the child, and so folks want to protect the gun over the child. Or I look at this: we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Without a floor fight, without a real debate, without the struggle over so-called political issues and what's in the mandate to send that. Now, can you imagine if we were talking about educating the poor or healthcare or anything like that? We've seen it. We have a fight over that, but we don't have a fight over war. So how can we, and is it the type of climate where those who are so-called in power are able to hear?
So I hear you. And, we in the Poor People's Campaign have been in West Virginia, marching against Manchin. And the way that we know that he's actually heard, he's not listening, but that he's actually heard, is because he's had to come out and comment. The fact that 80% of people in West Virginia support voting rights, 80% of people support the child tax credit, and he has the nerve to lie and say that he's doing this because he's speaking and acting on behalf of the people of West Virginia. Well, folks have made it clear. We don't always hear about it, but people are clear in West Virginia when we're marching through those streets and roads and on those bridges that he's listening to the Chamber of Commerce, not to the will of the people. And in fact, the Chamber of Commerce had to call him, early and often to make sure that he didn't actually follow the desires, the demands of the people. Each time the Poor People's Campaign has done something in West Virginia, although we have not seen the kind of movement that we need to see on Manchin, we have seen him have to kind of struggle to have a response and say that he does support living wages, and then not implement it, or that he is for voting rights and he votes for it, but he won't do away with that filibuster and actually that it would actually allow for it to be passed. And so, what history shows is that it's going to take a mighty force of people to not take no for an answer, and to keep on coming and keep on building. And again, what we have seen since Uvalde, since Buffalo, and the fact that there have been mass shootings, and I agree with you, Reverend Hagler, the fact that we have still not seen and seen passed through the Senate and the House, but through the Senate, actual regulation of guns. Why do we need military grade equipment in our communities? We just do not. And if we look across the world, the reason we're having these mass shootings here is because we have policies that allow it to happen, and make us completely complicit in the death of those babies. I mean, the fact that the NRA was having their convention in Texas and they had more regulations on who could be carrying what weapons than we do in our schools, it says something about this nation. But we always know that the other side, of that face of the nation is that the people are the ones with the power to actually change things, and that's why June 18th. That's why folks in Adam Morgan are organizing. That's why people all across the city and all across the country are organizing, is because it's going to take that. We're not waiting for people to save us, but we're building the kind of power that can actually save this democracy and save people's lives and livelihoods.
Excellent. Kuti, I'm going to bring you back on. I want to know where we are in terms of raising the money that we need to raise.
Well, there is nothing. The thing is, people love justice, right? At the core, there are people out there that really have a passion for justice, like you, like your guests, and they are responding. And so we want to say thank you to Gregory West out of Clinton, Maryland. And he's also picking up, so he likes his jazz too, because he's picking up that vinyl set, that 3LP, A Man After My Own Heart. Thank you, Gregory, so much. Also, Mona, and I think we know which Mona this is. I'm just going to take a hunch. I'm not going to say the last name, but thank you, sweetie. And Reverend Hagler and I so appreciate you. She says She would like to thank Katia and Reverend Barbara and Reverend Hagler and Reverend Theoharis for all their great work. So thank you very much, Mona. We appreciate you. And no stranger to WPFW, former board member Renee Bowser. Thank you, Renee. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Yay, Renee.
Yes, indeed. So let's just keep it going. Keep it going. You know, Reverend Hagler threw the gauntlet down and said, why do we have to stop? Let's make $1,000 this morning. So let's keep going, y'all. 800-222-9739, WPFWFM.org are ways to connect, or 202-588-9739. You know the gifts that are there for you. You can pick up that Prince. You can pick up our Jump Drive Voices That Change the World for a pledge of $200. And you talk about revolutionary voices. You'll have 1,600 hours of voices like Rosa Parks, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, Bob Dylan, Alice Walker, Howard Zinn, Noam Chomsky, Angela Davis, Lorraine Hansberry, James Baldwin, Bell Hooks, Muhammad Ali. The list goes on and on and on and on. And it is wonderful chronicling justice movement since 1949. That's the Pacifica Radio Archives on a little flash drive, yours for a pledge of $200. But of course, you can just pledge $5, $10, become a sustaining member. Maybe you can do something every month, $5, $10, $20, $100 a month, whatever fits into your budget and is in your heart to do. Let's go for it this morning. Let's make that $1,000. 800-222-9739 for justice, or WPFWFM.org. It makes us feel so good to know that you understand the mission of WPFW and you are supporting it and supporting the wonderful programmers like Reverend Hagler that bring this work to, and his guests that bring this work to you. So Reverend Hagler, let's go.
All right, we can do it. We can do it. We are able to do it out there. You got the ability, the power to get it done. And, you know, and I look at it this way. You got Zillah running all over town, connecting with groups, talking to people, being a cheerleader to mobilize people to the 17th in Adams Morgan and to the 18th, our Poor People's Assembly. You got Theoharis, Reverend Liz Theoharis running all across this country, wearing herself out, filled with the Spirit and with power. You got Reverend Dr. William Barber doing the same thing, running up and down over hills and valleys. And you got Vikram over in Adams Morgan doing this because they feel a calling to engage in the work. And that's really what this is about. It's about all of us having a calling, doing what we're able to do. And that comes down to marching feet, that comes down to talking mouths, that comes down to the generosity to support things. Because one thing is clear, is that on the right has no problem supporting their movement of greed, of anger, of racism, of white supremacy, of misogyny. They ain't got no problem supporting that. You know, we need to be about the business of supporting those progressive voices and those progressive outlets such as WPFW so that we can continue to get the word out. Please give. If you can only give a little bit, give. If you can give a lot, give. But give, and give. And I just want to ask again a question. I want to come back to each of us and ask this question. Where do we see this as ultimately going? I'm going to start with Brother Vikram again. Where do you see this ultimately going? People are going to be out there on the 17th. On the 17th, going to join you on the 17th. But where do you see this issue as ultimately going? How do we make a change in the city, and also with the financial violence that you referenced to basically tame it and make it a just place, a more just place? Vikram, share with us.
I appreciate the question. You know, when Dr. King's life was cut short, his focus at that point, as many of us know, was to do with this set of issues around economic disempowerment, economic disenfranchisement. And it was a direct result of his leadership that in Adams Morgan, we came together to create this exact site where we're going to come to on Friday the 17th. It was the first place in the nation that a Community Reinvestment Act agreement between a community and a bank was reached. And that was the moment where we had a tool to end redlining in America. And it happened in Adams Morgan at this site that we'll be coming together at. And so I say that to put this in the broader sweep of history, that this is a long struggle, that we better get close to our higher power, get close to our faith, and get close to our community to create that one by one, as you said, Reverend Hagler, that one story at a time, one situation at a time, we come to understand the predicament that our poor people in America, like Miguel, face, and we can create that there is truly over time a transformation. And anybody who's looking will say, if you look back to 50 years ago, certain things about our society are transformed, right? And so, if we look 50 years forward, my hope is that we're going to be in a very different place and much sooner than that. But we've got to keep coming together, keep telling our stories, keep lifting each other up, and keep learning about all the ways that the people who've come before us have laid the groundwork, and all the ways that we can continue to build on their work.
Vikram, if people wanted to get in touch with you or get engaged somehow, how can they do that?
So the website for our efforts in Adams Morgan at the Plaza, which is the place that was created as part of that Community Reinvestment Act agreement. The website is admoplaza.com, ADMOPLAZA, admoplaza.com. And we're also at admoplaza.com on the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So you can reach out through any of those channels.
So plug in through those channels and prepare to be with the community and Brother Vikram on the 17th of June. At what time?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, 17th of June. 3 o'clock where?
At 1800 Columbia Road Northwest.
1800 Columbia Road Northwest on June 17th, 1800 Columbia Road Northwest. Be there. And Zillah, I want to ask you, what does the Poor People's Campaign need right now in DC as we move closer to the 17th and the 18th and beyond?
Perfect. One, thank you, WPFW, for really standing up with us throughout these years since the beginning. I would be remiss if I said that, because we need radio stations like this nationwide to tell stories of people, because that's one of our goals of the campaign is switch the narrative, because the narratives that we're given are so jacked up and sponsored that, we need the real knowledge out here of the conditions of everyday people. So one, what do we need? Spread the word about the 16th and the 17th. We're doing the event at Adams Morgan, and then we have a dinner. Somebody's hurting our people, communal dinner at Freedom Plaza at 5 o'clock. And then after that at 7:30, we're going to be at the Lincoln Memorial to mourn the loss of all the people we lost because of the jacked up healthcare system, because of COVID, because of gun violence, because even with gun violence, Columbine happened my sophomore year of high school, and we're still talking about it. And that's 20 some odd years later, and we're still praying about it. But now it's time to really manifest and be about it. Also, we just, spread the word, come get materials. They can email me for materials. We have flyers, we have t-shirts, we have stickers, because we put our signs all over the city, but yet they still some people keep taking them up. I'm not going to name names, but some intersections where there's a good flow, our yard signs have been taken away. So it's just been been really real.
I got a couple signs hanging on my church, and thank you for putting that up. And give folks a way to get in touch with you, Zillah.
Perfect. You can text Zillah at poorpeoplescampaign.org.
That's ZILLAH.
Yes, perfect. Yes.
Poorpeoplescampaign.org.
Yeah.
All right.
Or our social medias. So
All right. Thank you so much, Zillah Wesley the second. And Liz Theoharis, I want to just ask, what are your feelings as we move towards the 18th, and what are some ways in which people can be plugged in? Because this goes further, this station goes further than just Washington, D.C. I know that there's people listening in Virginia and West Virginia right now as well. But what do we need as we move this forward?
That's awesome. I mean, there's still time to sign up for the buses that are out there, and so if there are people that that want to be in the numbers as the Saints go marching in on Pennsylvania Avenue in DC, there is still time to sign up and all into next week. So please do come. We will also be live streaming. And if your organization wants to cross post and get it out there so that millions more have the chance to see and hear those that are most impacted. But then we've been talking about this as a moral march on Washington and to the polls. And, one of the biggest lessons from and teachings from, something like the 1963 March on Washington was this message to go back. Right? Go back to Alabama, go back to West Virginia, and keep on organizing. And so hoping that folk will reach out, if you have not already, to the coordinating committees that we have in almost every state across this country, right? And also in DC. We have a coordinating committee in DC because we know that we're going to win DC statehood. And so we have to have the real representation and organization of our people in DC as well. And so, and we will be having many more plans post June 18th to keep building towards direct action, to keep building our power. So hoping that there is still time to show up in DC, to show up online, but to get involved. We're saying this is not a moment. This is about building a movement, and this is not a day. This is a declaration. As Dr. Barbara was saying on a call that I was on yesterday, this is not a commencement. This is not about ending. This is about commencing the kind of power building and organizing and mobilizing that our communities desperately need. And so this is an all call, and this is a kind of all call moment because it's that serious.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Theoharis, Liz Theoharis. And I just want to let you know that I've been at Plymouth for 30 years. So I left Roxbury, Massachusetts 30 years ago. And I heard Liz's name back then. So that was quite some time with Dottie Stevens.
Dottie Stevens and the welfare rights. Exactly. Welfare rights. I've been following. I've been seen past Reverend Hagler as the kind of true preacher that this city and that this country needs for a long time.
Bless you. You're so kind, and it's good to have you here. And we're gonna go back to Katia. Katia got some words you want to share with us before we sign off.
Yes, indeed. Well, we want to say thank you, Reverend Hagler. First of all, to you all and your guests today. It's just been magnificent. We can't wait to be down on Pennsylvania Avenue with the Poor People's Campaign, broadcasting live on the Pacifica Network, all 5 stations, plus hopefully most of our 300 affiliates on June 18th. So all across the country, you'll be able to hear the powerful message of this moral movement and a moral revival, as they say. And we also want to thank, I have to shout her out, the new poet laureate of Alexandria, Ms. Zaina Assam. Thank you so much.
Lord, Zaina.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. She says, thank you for your programming that keeps justice at the forefront of our minds and our work. And we also want to say thank you to Clyde, who is a constant supporter. Thank you, Clyde. He says, Reverend Hagler, you're the best. And Reverend Hagler, we all agree. Mike, myself, Jerry, we all in here singing your praises.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Y'all scaring me, but bless you.
Well, so we just want to remind people, don't stop there. We don't have to stop. Keep it going all day long. 800-222-9739. Please support the station that supports you. Our dear Skia Muhammad would always say, be for who be for you. That's what time it is. So keep the calls coming. Reverend Hagler, back to you.
All right. And we are pretty much out of time if I'm looking at Michael correctly. And I want to thank our guest this morning. I want to thank the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, Zillah Wesley II of the Poor People's Campaign, and Vikram Chiruvolu of the group Adams Morgan for Reasonable Development. It is so good to have be with you today, and we will be with you again. I will be with you again next month. I look forward to being with you on the second Wednesday of the month. I would like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank Michael Nasella and Katia and the entire WPFW community. I can't wait to be with you again. Be empowered, be uplifted, march on, march on, march on.
Reverend Hagler, hold up. We got another one. We want to thank Keith. Thank you so much. And we are over $1,000. He says he is proud of the work that Reverend Hagler does and his understanding of the world. Yes, indeed, Keith. Right on. Thank you, Reverend Hagler. You put it out there in the universe and you did it.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. And as I said, march on, march on. We'll be back again. We'll see you soon. Take care.